Kicking off this visionary part of the day, we have Stephanie Rowe, Deputy Director General Biodiversity, presenting on behalf of the Minister of Conservation, Poto Williams. Kia ora, Stephanie. Welcome to the stage.
Mori ora kia tātou, tina tātou, kua hui hui mai nei I tēnei rā. Kia ora, ko Steph Rowe ho. As Izzy said, I'm the DDG Biodiversity, Heritage and Visitors. I recently returned to the Department of Conservation after a 13-year walkabout to other places, and I came back to what I consider to be my dream job. So I'm still counting my time back in weeks. Really, really excited to be back. And unfortunately, I was asked to step in yesterday, so I do have to run away to a wonderful day of meetings after this session. I would have loved to chat to many of you, but I'm sure we'll get plenty of time because I'm not going anywhere. I plan to be with the department for a long time to do all the cool work that you're talking about today. So a bit of a tough gig. I know you were all hoping to hear from the Minister of Conservation this morning. She's very disappointed not to be here, but was really keen that someone came to pass on the thoughts she had about envisioning the future. So I hope I do a good job stepping into her shoes to give her speech on her behalf. If she were here, she would acknowledge that this conference is a signal that a significant groundswell of society is ready and action-oriented about the job of conservation. Conservation is about people as much as being about the 18 million years of evolution expressed on our landscapes. She's pleased with the hard work of iwi, whānau and hapu, and of the many environmental community groups, the primary sector, and all the others who engage with departments, ministries and ministers and the councils nationally. And they're the real leaders that we serve and connect with in the work that we do. And community-minded people such as these have had such a strong hand in developing Te Mana o Te Taio, also known as the Aotearoa New Zealand Biodiversity Strategy, and the related work such as proposed in the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity. Te Mana o Te Taio, as a strategy, sets out challenges that must be addressed to save and enhance biodiversity. And I'm going to remind you of some of those that are in the mind of the Minister as she looks forward to the next 30 years. One of the first things she wanted to talk to you about was her vision for the cloaking of the land. 30 years from now, much more land should be draped in a protective cloak of natural forests and grasslands. You heard yesterday from the Director General of Conservation, Penny Nelson, also known as my boss, who set out why transformational change and collective action that you're discussing in this event is necessary. And she talked to you about Te Mana o Te Taio and the 3 po, or the 3 pillars, about getting the system right, enabling and the work of conservation and protecting, restoring and wise sustainable use. So looking back, I feel like so far I've heard about the quote of the conference to date. I don't want to start a competition, but secretly I am. I heard Rob McGowan said that our forests today don't have their underpants. That sounds pretty awesome to me, and I'm definitely going to try and get that in some DoC publications at some point. I also heard and actually I have to just do a sidebar here. I'm pretty stoked to be speaking somewhere that Tim Flannery is here. I do have quite a lot of my bookshelf dedicated to him, so that's awesome. And my favourite book, if you haven't read it, is Country. I just think it represents an amazing period of exploration in science, and it was a wild ride and I deeply enjoyed it. So anyway, I can't see you, Tim, don't know where you are, but kia ora. So yesterday Tim said that biodiversity made our climate and we can't solve the climate crisis without saving our biodiversity. I hope I got that close enough. And do you know, it's interesting to me, that really resonates because that's one of the main reasons I wanted to come back to this role, because it's at the heart of how we're trying to think about the future for the department as well. So looking forward, I think this is something that would also really resonate with the Minister as well, and I know it's top of mind for many ministers as they look at the climate change portfolio ahead of them. So if the Minister was here, she would say that we need to move as a group and support across disciplines. The Te Mana o Te Tai strategy is another reminder that nature and economy are related, and it calls out the disconnect between ourselves, nature and the economy. And you've heard it before, and what she would say is that collaboration is key. And it's increasingly apparent that to do the right thing for nature, we have to do the right thing for ourselves and for future generations. Te Mana o Te Tai speaks of changes and of outcomes we need to achieve to care for the natural world. It paints a picture of the future where resilience, diversity and adaptability are part of the whole network. And we need a fundamental shift to our systems to retain biodiversity protection at the heart of economic activity. And these concepts are not mutually exclusive, and she would contend that they are interdependent. So in this conference, you're unpacking the practicalities of stewardship and kaitiakitanga, knowing nature is not only valuable for its own sake, but also essential for economic wellbeing, our mental, physical, and cultural and social wellbeing. With respect to mana whenua, the opportunities to participate in nature and to benefit from it are not the same for everyone, and she would respect and acknowledge that in our journey as treaty partners, there are social inequities and there is work to do. And if we want to solve conservation issues, we often need to solve social issues too. So looking ahead, planting trees, creating abundance of kiraru, and working with our treaty partners, local tangata whenua, to get the opportunity to undertake kaupapa Māori practices in the work that we do. Any intention to work with taonga necessitates developing strong, genuine and respectful relationships with the kaitiaki of those taonga. She also wanted to talk about our values and big changes coming, because we all have a duty to care for nature that requires a societal change. The threat of pests and diseases and anticipated shifts in the pattern of weather is already at our doorstep. The twin threats of pests and climate change mean big, bold use of brand new technologies may have to be adopted. And as a society, we will be weighing the benefits with the risks of new landscape scale conservation measures that none of us may even know about today. And she's keenly aware that careful consideration of a range of values is essential for the social adoption of ideas and technologies. The last thing we need is polarisation and disruption. The fight to save nature could divide us or bring us together, and she would say that the choice is ours. With regard to conservation on private land, the primary sector's participation and support, and that's many of you here today, to address the direct drivers of biodiversity loss is essential for us to be successful. That's because many of the remnants of forest occur on farmland, and it's also because primary sector participation influences system change and it influences how society views the role of nature. Te Mana o Te Tai notes there is a role for government to understanding the barriers to protecting existing biological heritage on private land, and she's keen to keep seeking options for addressing those barriers. The evidence for the need for revegetation. So the Minister wanted to reference a 2006 paper entitled Past and Future Trajectories of Forest Lost in New Zealand, which makes interesting reading. Historically, natural forest cover in the majority of New Zealand landscapes has been reduced, and evidence compiled then in 2006 predicted wider degradation by 2050. Of interest here is that at that time establishing exotic plantations was a key driver of loss of native forest and shrubland, but positively the paper suggests that annual rates of native planting and habitat restoration could bring forest integrity back in many parts of Aotearoa by the year 2050. So here we are 16 years later since that paper was published, and she feels that things are pointing in the right direction, but we need to supercharge it. So earlier this month, the Minister was in Queenstown planting on the side of Coronet Peak, and we're probably going to pop up a photo of that, with trees that count. The site had been invaded by wilding pines, broom, sweetbriar, and these weeds had been cleared and planting of original forest has begun. The goal of 350,000 native plants planted across Coronet Peak over the next 5 years is the ambitious plan. Led by Trees That Count and in partnership with Soho property landowners and Te Tapu o Tāne, who grew the eco-source plants, they planted the first 12,500 trees for this season. And she hears that the restoration of the mana of Coronet Peak will be of significant te ao Māori cultural value to Ngāi Tahu. In a related effort, 100,000 trees across Aotearoa are almost entirely on private land, have been promised by Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee National Planting Project, and it commemorates her 70 years that she had on the throne. And this project is championed by Trees That Count and is a legacy to honour her years of service. The Minister also wanted to talk about the places we plant. The places we plant already have a history and have many connections and linkages, and it's about keeping it local. The trajectory of any new planting is strongly influenced by the seeds that we use. This session's speakers will cover ground on the right plant in the right place, and we should aim to enhance ancient natural values and support the recovery of old native forests wherever they might be. Our planting decision should outlive us, and it's our right to take care. And it's right to take care. Coming to climate change, on the topic of climate change influencing forest change, we have not appreciably altered our lifestyles to adapt to the one-way ticket we issued ourselves. Affirmative action for the biodiversity crisis and climate change must come as a groundswell from within this room and be supported by successive governments. We must take a breath here and not be daunted. The protection and restoration of biodiversity could be at the heart of New Zealand's response to climate change, as we will hear in the sessions today. We also wanted to take a moment to talk about DoC's Climate Change Adaptation Plan, which goes through till 2025. The Department is managing large, mostly intact native ecosystems. If we protect these systems, we increase resilience and sustain and enhance carbon sequestration. This year, the Department has earmarked $659,000 to prepare and guide its response to climate change, and its action plan sets out a process to choose important sites for species management and management of vulnerable ecosystems. This includes the at-risk places we all work in now, including investment by DoC and by partners and communities. So we're looking at climate resilience in terms of improving controlling pest plants and pest animals, and by suppressing and preventing fires. We're looking at climate adaptation, which includes hearing feedback from treaty partners and other people we work with, and then actions for the most at-risk and vulnerable biodiversity. And it includes many actions that will arise out of constantly learning and adapting. These might include translocations of vulnerable species, altering habitats, restoration after climate disaster, and selecting for carbon sequestration or seed banking. So in conclusion, the Minister wanted to leave with you that our well-being for biodiversity, for predator-free New Zealand, for climate change mitigation, her challenge to you is to look hard at the opportunities presented to us today and galvanise actions that 30 years from now deliver the following possibilities. Communities everywhere naturally link their well-being and prosperity to their taio ngāhere. Forests link National Park to City Street, kai ngāhere to marae. Aotearoa is a massive native carbon sink. Forests get back what browsing animals have taken. Forests cloak renewed wetlands and clean water is a given. We're self-sustained for wood products. The ultimate prize, forest rejuvenation and forest stewardship, puts a handbrake on the biodiversity crisis. And the Minister wanted to end with a whakatauki that she was gifted for this occasion by Te Runanga o Awarua, a Ngāi Tahu of Southland. Ko te reo a kia uta, ko te whakataki mai a tōroa ki tai, he kotoko ki te raki, he kakapo ki te whenua. The voice of the kia is heard inland, and the voice of the albatross is heard at sea. A kotoko in the sky, a kakapo on the ground, everything has its rightful place. To the Minister, this whakatauki symbolises the once common kakapo, symbolic of human interference, and our desire to change before it may be too late. Kia ora.